in a tangential direction, spinning the craft. This is a photograph that appeared in a news agency of a craft very similar to the German craft. These are the real Abrocars that they never unveiled to the public, other than some little designer leaks like this one. Anti-gravity flying devices were built in Maryland by an inventor that abandoned them. This is a typical Illuminati signature. They would quietly finance an inventor, and after they make sure that he has something and the thing works, they would abduct him, buy him off if they can, kill him off if they can't, abduct him for sure, and move him to a secret location to continue on with his research. In a Maryland barn, parts of a saucer-like flying machine were found by state police in an abandoned tool shed in Marley Park, Maryland in 1949. Air Force investigators were unable to find the inventor who had built the craft before World War II and then had disappeared. This is the Illuminati signature. In many barns around the world, secret devices have been built. In the book Genesis by Harbinson, he talks at length about the airship scare of the 1890s being, again, a secretly financed Illuminati project. Some Wall Street bankers paid for these airships. They were built and tested. These were free energy powered or nuclear powered airships in combination with anti-gravity, according to certain reports that I found recently. And this is a typical signature of how the Illuminati work. They would constantly scout for the best inventors in the field. They would secretly finance them, and if they're really able to deliver something, then they would disappear. And one more invention would be hoarded inside the bottomless Illuminati safes, where they have things that are really incredible. I've heard stories that the Illuminati had a radio way back in the Napoleonic times, and they used the information to rig the London Stock Exchange, and in 3 hours the Rothschilds bought all the actions of they became the owners of the British government. At that time, 200 years ago, basically only the governments were in the business of issuing stocks. So what they did was they spread the false rumor that Napoleon was victorious at Waterloo, and he was about to march on London 2 days from now. Stock market crash, and they bought for nothing, for a penny to the dollar probably, all the stocks of the British government. The news came, the real news, and they had the real news through the radio immediately. The real news came through the much slower surface mail. 2 days later, the stock market promptly rebounded, but a different person was the owner of the British government. So a simple technology can allow an incredible competitive edge over your opposition, over your whatever, competition. A guy in England, when I was there for this Wembley Arena conference, mentioned a book. I'm waiting for him to send me a copy of that. A book by a Scottish author who relates the story of somebody who made the wrong turn and entered into a room in the 1810s again, and found somebody sitting on a table in front of a strange looking kind of wooden crate with some knobs on it, talking to somebody else in the United States. And you could hear the voice coming from that crate. I mean, this was not a telegraphic simple. I thought at the beginning that, well, they were using a simple Tesla coil and some long antenna. Any goldsmith can build you a primitive Tesla coil, even in Roman, ancient Roman or Athens times, ancient Greek times, given the exact explanation how to do that. But I realized that the Illuminati had a lot more than that. They had a wireless radio voice communication. They probably asked for that from their alien tutors after their messenger was shot by lightning in Bavaria in the 1780s or 90s. And so the Bavarian government got all the pouch with all the documents of the secret Illuminati Brotherhood, and this was the biggest and the only leak, almost explosive decompression that happened with the secret Illuminati Brotherhood, and they took stringent measures for that never to be repeated. after that they didn't need any messengers anymore. They were just talking to each other all over the world, and they can coordinate their campaigns and their bombings and their terrorist attacks. The Illuminati have been the biggest contract killer on the planet and the biggest terrorist contractor for the last several centuries. In my research of the German space projects and the German heritage after the war, I came to the strange book by Narciso Genovese about an Italian group that finally convinced the Pope to give them the files of Marconi. Marconi was killed by Duce for refusing to give him the death ray. This is a second story about the death ray developed on the planet. Marconi developed it. It was basically the same Tesla system for wireless energy transmission around the globe. But Marconi realized that if a plane flies into the emitter beam that comes from the power plant up to the ionospheric transmission layer, the crew would be microwaved. And so he was talking to Duce to give the humanity this free energy. And Duce said, well, Marconi, you don't understand the invention here. The side effect, this airplane crew microwaving is what I'm after. This is the ultimate weapon. Give me that weapon and we would rule the world. Marconi refused. He was promptly killed next morning by Duce. And his files ended up for safekeeping with the Pope. After the war, the surviving scientists convinced the Pope to give them the files. They wrote written oaths that they would not get any funding from any government and they would not use the technology for military purposes. Then the Vatican brokered a private financing to the amount of $180 million by oil magnates, private financiers, and heads of state. Very secret, probably on religious ground more than anything else. And the group descended on Argentina, bought a giant plantation, probably as big as a small European state, somewhere in the Argentinian Andes, and assembled quietly a top-notch group of world researchers. By 1952, they were flying their craft all over the world. Craft of a circular shape. So according to Narciso Genovese, an engineer on the project, who lived until recently in Tijuana, it was the Italians that buzzed Capitol Hill and the White House and Washington in general in that famous UFO flap of 1952. That resulted in the biggest press conference in the Pentagon. 350 journalists were there the next morning, after a dozen of these UFOs were buzzing and playing joyfully above the Capitol building. There is a Look magazine photograph of half a dozen of them hanging behind the illuminated dome of the Capitol building. In '56, they perfected the technology. This is a craft built by Tesla technology that was half a century old by that time, or more. A giant condenser. The inner cabin was insulated with glass insulators from the outer shell. These were some anti-gravity turbines that I have no idea how they were working, but I suspect that some of the free energy Illuminati dirigibles of the 1890s, probably again built by secret Tesla technology or somebody else's technology, were using similar, I mean, they look like, how should I say, not egg mixers, but egg beaters, but like these paint beater propellers that painters would use to prepare their paint in the bucket. And so they departed on Columbus Day 1956 on a flight to Mars in the company of several Martian craft. The Martians landed there about a year earlier and helped them iron out some of the details. For 2 hours they reached the moon, spent the night at the Martian colony there, Martian base on the moon, and then for a day and a half they reached Mars. There are very little technical details in the book, so I couldn't figure out from them whether this was a true story or not. However, the most revealing detail here is the strange trajectory that they took toward the moon and Mars. Rockets normally go on a figure-8 trajectory. They depart from the earth, they go to the moon, they circle around.